The Netherlands today is fast, digital, and always online. But there was a time when life felt heavier in your hands, louder in the streets, and slower in a way that somehow made it better. The 1980s weren't just another decade. They were the last moment before everything changed. Money had weight, music had attitude. And if you missed something on TV, you didn't rewind, you just missed it. Entire families planned their evenings around a single screen, while the whole country could freeze overnight for one skating race or erupt in orange without warning. Some of these memories feel warm and familiar. Others were messy, tense, and quietly shaping the Netherlands we live in today. And what's wild is how many of these things disappeared without anyone really noticing. Because once you step back into the Dutch 80s, you realize something unsettling. We didn't just lose objects, we lost a way of living. And the first thing we lost might surprise you. Money in the 80s didn't live on a screen. You felt it. The Dutch guilder had real weight, real texture, and designs that actually meant something. Pulling out a banknote wasn't just paying. It was an experience. The colors were bold, almost artistic. The 100 guilder snipe. The massive 250 guilder lighthouse. These weren't just bills, they were tiny works of art that made money feel valuable before you even spent it. Handing one over at a counter felt serious. You thought twice before doing it. And because everything was cash, you always knew exactly what you had left. No instant balance checks, no quiet overdrafts. When your wallet got thin, you felt it immediately. Spending was slower, more deliberate, and weirdly more satisfying. But money wasn't the only thing that forced you to slow down back then. Just getting from one place to another came with its own ritual. Getting around in the 80s took effort, not apps, not alerts, actual thinking. Before you stepped onto a bus or tram, you checked your strippenkaart like it was a lifeline. That thin piece of blue cardboard decided how far you could go. Stamp too few zones and you'd panic. Stamp too many and you felt like you just wasted money. The sound of the stamp clicking down was part of the journey. Miss it and you'd feel eyes on you. Everyone knew the rules and everyone learned them the hard way at least once. Planning a train trip was even more serious. You grabbed the small yellow NS timetable and studied it like homework. Miss your train by 2 minutes and that was it. No live updates, no reroutes, just waiting. And if you needed to call someone when plans changed, you didn't scroll, you searched. 2 massive phone and postcode books lived in every home, ready to be slammed shut in frustration when you couldn't find the name fast enough. Travel was slower, messier, and less forgiving. But somehow, it pulled people into the same rhythm. And that rhythm showed up most clearly once everyone got home at night. Evenings in the 80s followed an unspoken rule. When a show was on, everything else stopped. Families didn't scatter to different rooms. They gathered. One couch, one TV. And if you arrived late, you stayed quiet. Programs like Zeggens Aja weren't just shows. They were shared reference points. The next day at school or work, everyone had seen the same thing. Saturday nights belonged to sound mix show. Living rooms turned into mini concert halls, with people judging performances like experts. Kids stayed up later than usual. Parents pretended not to notice. And Saturday mornings, that was sacred territory. Cartoons weren't on demand. They were a reward for waking up early. Miss the opening, and you were out of luck. There was no pausing, no replaying, no catching up later. TV happened once and together. That's what made it powerful. But while television brought people into the same room, music was pulling an entire generation in a new direction. Something shifted in the 80s. For the first time in a long while, singing in Dutch wasn't awkward. It was bold. Bands like Domar, Het Goede Doel, and Frank Boyen Group didn't just fill the charts. They spoke directly to how people felt. The songs were catchy, sure, but they were also honest, sometimes hopeful, sometimes uncomfortable. And that made them stick. These weren't background tracks. Lyrics were debated, lines were quoted. You didn't just listen to Nederpop, you identified with it. It became a way of saying, this is who we are, without trying to sound like anyone else. Music spilled out of bedrooms, schoolyards, and living rooms. And when you wanted to take that sound with you, you didn't stream it, you carried it. A cassette, a Walkman. One tape at a time. Press play, and the world faded out. Until the tape jammed, of course. And suddenly you were performing surgery with a pencil, hoping to save your favorite song. It felt personal, almost private. But when people wanted escape on a bigger scale, they didn't stay home. They went somewhere very specific. If you wanted a movie in the 80s, you had to earn it. The video store wasn't just a stop, it was an event. Rows of VHS tapes lined the walls, their covers promising way more than the film usually delivered. You'd walk in with a plan and walk out 40 minutes later, still undecided. And then there was the fear. You finally spot the movie everyone's talking about, only to see an empty case, already rented, again. Suddenly, you're negotiating with yourself, settling for something you'd never choose today. The tape went home in a plastic case, rewound if you were polite, penalties waiting if you weren't. Watching a movie felt deliberate because it was. You chose it. You waited for it. And when you weren't chasing movies, you were chasing movement. Fitness shows filled the TV, and suddenly everyone was sweating in neon spandex. Leg warmers, headbands, and optimism everywhere. Aerobics wasn't just exercise, it was a lifestyle. But for all the entertainment and color, there were moments in the 80s that shut everything down. Moments that stopped the country cold, literally. When the cold finally hit, it wasn't just winter, it was anticipation. The Elfstedentocht wasn't planned, it waited. And when the ice was finally thick enough in 1985, the Netherlands slipped into a kind of collective obsession. People checked temperatures like forecasts of fate. Then it happened again in 1986, 2 years in a row. Schools slowed down. Work paused. Streets emptied. Everyone was watching the same stretch of frozen water, following skaters pushing themselves past exhaustion over 200 kilometers. This wasn't just a race. It was endurance, tradition, and national pride rolled into one freezing day. Even people who didn't care about skating suddenly cared deeply. You remember where you were when it happened. Most people do. And just when it felt like nothing could top that shared intensity. A few years later, the country would explode again. Not from cold, but from pure joy. In 1988, the Netherlands didn't just celebrate, it erupted. When the national team won the European Championship, the country turned orange overnight. Streets flooded, canals filled with boats packed shoulder to shoulder. Strangers hugged like old friends. It felt like everyone was outside at the same time, convinced they were witnessing something that would never happen again. For a moment, everything else disappeared. Politics, stress, routines. None of it mattered. That victory wasn't just about football. It was release, a shared high that still gets talked about decades later. But the 80s weren't only joy and unity. Beneath the celebrations, tension had been building. Years earlier, Queen Beatrix's inauguration had shown a very different side of the country. The no housing, no coronation riots turned Amsterdam into chaos. Smoke in the streets, anger on full display. It was a reminder that not everyone felt heard, and not everyone was celebrating the same future. The contrast was sharp. Euphoria on one side, frustration on the other. And all of it played out against a backdrop that's impossible to forget. Because the 80s didn't just sound a certain way. Ordering from the Wehkamp catalog turned the living room into a miniature shopping mall with pen circles marking coveted items long before clicks and checkouts existed. Knowledge came in bulky packages too. Encyclopedia sets lined shelves, occupying space and curiosity alike. If you wanted to figure something out, you physically flipped pages, carried weight, and sometimes argued over the spelling of an entry. And fitness, fashion, and fun collided on TV screens. Aerobics shows made entire neighborhoods bounce in sync, while Walkmans allowed personal soundtracks in public spaces, giving everyone a private escape in the middle of all the chaos. Every corner, every object, every sound was part of a decade that demanded attention, and it left a mark that's hard to forget. But looking back, you realize the 80s weren't just about the objects or the music. They were about a way of life that's almost impossible to experience today. Looking back, the Dutch 80s feel bigger than they really were. They were loud, colorful, sometimes chaotic, and completely analog. Every coin, every VHS, every stamp on a strippenkaart reminded you that life required effort. Effort that made each small victory, each shared laugh, each song on your Walkman feel more real. It was the last decade before screens took over, before schedules became digital, before music could live anywhere but in your headphones. It was a time when patience mattered, when families watched together, when the country literally stopped for ice. We lost more than objects. We lost rituals, textures, and the way the world forced us to slow down and pay attention. And maybe that's why nostalgia hits so hard. Because we can't go back, but we can still feel it. So what do you miss the most? The Dutch 80s weren't just a decade. They were an experience. And once you've lived it in memory, you never really leave it behind. If you love taking a trip back to the Dutch 80s, the music, the streets, the memories, make sure you hit subscribe to Dear Old Holland. We dig up the stories, the nostalgia, and the hidden details that made this country unforgettable. Click the button and join us, because there's so much more of the Netherlands' past waiting to be rediscovered.